So I'm here with Fran Chuan, uh, who is in Barcelona, Spain, or near Barcelona, Spain. I'm in New York City. Uh, Fran and I are met each other at the Babson Symposium for entrepreneurial educators several years ago, and we were fortunate to meet each other in New York City to talk about some common interest in business. He works as a consultant to major corporations in Spain and in Europe, so we share that experience as well. And he's also an entrepreneur uh, uh, by training and by choice, and has a lot of experience both with startups, new ventures, and as I said, in large corporations. So we share a common experience. We've um, had very interesting discussions and certainly emails over the last couple of months since we met in New York, related to a book that he published called Innovation 2.0. It was published in Spanish, and he gave me an autographed copy of it, which I was very thankful of. It gave me a chance to struggle with reading Spanish, but it's a topic that I know a little bit about. But I had not encountered the topic in the way that Fran was putting it forth in the book. So I wanted to talk to Fran and interview him about the notions and the premise of the book, Innovation 2.0. So Frank, can you tell me about what initiated the drafting of the book with your co-author, Jay Rao? Uh, and what's the basic premise of the book? What are you putting forth? And what is it that you want people to understand about Innovation 2.0?
Ray, first of all, thank you for the invitation for this interview, record, and publishing data. And 2 years ago, when we met in Babson, was a pleasure. Babson, I discovered Babson more than 5 years ago when I first visited Babson, and then I met a great guy, which is Jay Rao. With him, we developed a lot of theories, and he is a great academical guy and it's a great, a bright person. And together we set up some pillars of concepts that we developed in our book that last year was published in Spanish, and in 3 weeks will be published in English. But we changed the title. In the English version will be The Discipline and Culture of Innovation, a Socratic Journey. And the Spanish title was Innovation 2.0, and why 2.0, which is making some confusion about using social network, etc., and it is not. 2.0 because we already, we have to go forward about the first version of innovation. We are already too much time in front of innovation, trying to develop innovation, try to develop culture of innovation, like as we did in the past with quality and other aspects in the companies. And that doesn't work. It's because logistics, quality, etc., they are based on logics that you can describe by fluxograms and methodologies and processes. But innovation requires a next step, which is the 2.0, which is involving the people. You can develop the best methodology and fluxograms, but if you don't capture the emotion of the people, never you will be an innovator. And that is the main pillar, is how to get innovation as a sustainable thing and a sustainable part of the company. That is making culture. And culture is an issue that you can just develop doing things, not describing things. So less thinking, less writing, and more acting. So we focus on people. in the book we describe Socratic dialogue between an academical and a manager, talking about how important it is develop the people initiatives, develop the people needs, grit to put new ideas on the market.
So what are the pillars that you establish with Jay that you present in the book? You're describing innovation in a slightly different way than it's typically described, which oftentimes refers to the end product or the outcome, right, as being innovative, right, and then innovation being the process by which that product was produced. But it seems like you're actually putting forth a notion that's a bit broader and more encompassing about the entire fabric of the business, being the activities of the people and how they interact with each other, and the social fabric that exists within the company. So what are you referring to when you say the pillars? Are there, I mean, aside from the people and acting, what are you referring to as the pillars?
For a long time, Jay Rao and Professor Babson and Joe Weintraub, a colleague of Jay, they analyzed a lot of companies, they analyzed a lot of success stories and failures, etc. And they found that all in common, they have 6 pillars. 6 pillars, they are more or less described on 3 are on the left side, so the logic part of the brain, and 3 are on the right part, the creative part of the brain. So the 3 of the left, they are processes, resources, and success. So which processes are you establishing, using, supporting for the innovation? Which resources are you putting available for people for innovation? Time, people, consultants, money, whatever it is. And how do you stimulate success, or how you penalty failure? On the right side is how the people think, how the people act, and which is the climate of the company. So, and they arrive to these conclusions, and with the time they develop a tool to measure the grade of development of these 6 pillars. So, and unfolding each pillar in 3 factors, and each factor in 3 elements. So in total, with 54 questions, we diagnose now very, very fine-tuning which is the state of the art of the company. So on the 3 pillars of the logic, and on the 3 pillars of the creativity, on the per people. And what we do then is we act in these elements that require more attention. And it could be that we act increasing the values, stimulating values, stimulating the people, creating new environments for that the people evaluate later on that we increase the value of this pillar, or decreasing some. For example, sometimes when we act with companies, we find that they create too much processes for innovation. So, and too much processes means that there are too much rules. If there are too much rules, the people are crazy because you are stimulating the term schizophrenic, because you are trying to stimulate the people think out of the box, but all the ideas that go out of the box doesn't match into the processes. So sometimes we have to act unlearning processes, erasing processes, uncreating, destroying processes. And that is like a situation where managers turn crazy. Most of the problems we have is with middle managers.
Adopting innovation in organizations has always been a struggle when the departments or the areas are somewhat mature, highly operational, and have had some success. They tend to want to continue doing those things for which seem to have worked in the past. And then what happens is those processes end up being part of the standard operating procedure for how things work. And then to scale the company, oftentimes quality control is introduced, which then establishes a new set of layering of rules. So there are layers and layers of sort of entrenched processes which then govern the behavior of the actors within the organization, and getting them to reconsider those processes and those rules in the light of a new situation or changing environment or climate becomes very challenging, right? Because then they enter into a comfort zone. So before we talk about the sort of the relationship of rules to creativity, I want to ask you a bit more about the assessment tool. And you described this matrix of logic versus creativity, and then the 54 questions that are that's used as an assessment. I'm assuming that it's not a diagnostic in a prescriptive sense, in that the 54 questions lead to a very clear path of solution. It just helps inform what you might want to do. Now, those questions, what's the method by which you do that assessment? Do you interview individuals? Do you get them into a group? I mean, I know that you're in Decidre, your consulting business. You get hired by companies to help them to understand this process, right? And so you go in and you do. How do you do the assessment? I'm interested in how, because I would think that itself would be somewhat invasive and disruptive and potentially upsetting, right? To have you come in and ask all these questions, right? So how do you do that? How do you do that with your clients?
We have a lot of experience already in the past 4 years applying and using the tool, and it's very, very, very easy. The questions are all focused from one perspective. The perspective is that reality doesn't exist. Reality doesn't exist. We interpret the reality. So the same fact could be interpreted from different way for a kid, for an adult, from a Catholic, that from a Muslim. It's the same reality. And you can see very clear that when you think on football, for example. The best team, if you ask 1,000 people who is the best team, you will get maybe 200 different answers. And when we see is, okay, reality doesn't exist, but how we define then which is the reality, the state of the art in a company about innovation, then we ask the people, each of them, what do you think about 54 elements? They are related, each three relate to one factor. On each three factor, they are related to one pillar. So when they answer the questions, they are answering reality. How do you alive? How do you feel? What do you think about this element in your company? So in fact, we use this tool too to customers, to asking customers about how they think, how they feel, how they see as innovator, one supplier and provider of services. And the surprise was that the company itself, the supplier, the company, thought they are very innovative. Customers thought, majority, that they are very conservative. So we have a really interesting gap. And that's happening in companies too. When you ask the top management, they say two sentences. We are innovative, but we have to be more innovative. And the second element is we very well define already processes for that, but we want to improve. Neither of that is usually, by our experience, is true. When you ask the people below the top management, they don't think the same way. So based on the survey, we go up the reality, which is the average of all opinions, all realities, all interpretation of the reality in the company. And we define a very adequate and accurate action plan. we have one experience with an insurance company. They define a roadmap for training and activities to develop innovation. And somehow they saw this not working, and they asked us. We went with the survey, and we take away some parts of the program they develop, and then everything flows. So in fact, we make a very bad deal because they pay just for the survey and diagnosis, and our recommendations was not to put more pieces in the workflow, but to take out some pieces of the workflow to make the stream go faster.
So you use a survey method, and you assume you distribute that to the constituents through some means, and working with the company, they identify who participates and those sorts of things, and help you access those people. And then you arrive at an aggregate. So the assessment isn't about individuals. It's really about how the aggregate view profiles the entire company. And it's interesting. So you said that the survey can also be used. It's used internally at the various levels of people operating in the company, from executive to operational people sort of making decisions. But then you also said that it can be applied to the external view, how a supplier or a buyer may also view the company, so that you get this dimension kind of perspective. So I would imagine that it produces some surprising and revealing results, which then every party who takes it, not having seen the aggregate view, there would be a gap between whatever it is that they thought and what would result in the aggregate view. And given that each individual would come at it from their own perspective, in your consultation, in the premise of Innovation 2.0, are you trying to make the culture more uniform to recognize the aggregate view, or are you taking the aggregate view and saying, well, there are some gaps between that and what an innovative company ought to do? And so how do you move people towards, are you moving people towards some idealized version of Innovation 2.0, or are you just trying to get people to recognize what already exists, and then they all have an agreement? So what is it that you're trying to accomplish with the company after you have the assessment? Like, what's the next step that you put forth?
Well, that is a very interesting question, which is different company by company, and our experience is very diverse, and it's not depending the size or the industry. It's depending about the capacity of the top management to unlearn, to take away some learnings from the past and make place in the brain for new learnings, new ways to do things. So what you say, thinking out the box. After we have the assessment, we define clearly where are the topics, the elements, the ambits of the company that we have to act for. And that the issue is many times companies hire us to act, and we say no if the board is not ready, they don't agree to be the first to go through the process. So the main success factor is when the top management agree to be the first after the assessment, the first to go through the workshops, where in these workshops we define what is innovation, why innovate, and how innovate. It's a very simple workshop, but in our experience, up to now, never was not a surprising workshop. Many managers come into the workshop where they think, oh, we will listen and see or again, things that we already know. But it's an experiential workshop. It's not a lecture session. No, it's a workshop. So more or less 70% of the time they are playing, acting. And the experience, what is innovation? The experience, why innovate, and the experience, how to innovate. And of course, in the how to innovate, we use the results from the assessment to say exactly what they have to do in their company, in their situation, because the how to innovate is different company to company.
In the techniques that you use in the workshops, are these for every assessment question that you have a set of exercises that you introduce in the workshop to address gaps that were identified in the assessment? Is it?
No, what we have is a toolkit for 6 pillars. Each pillar has 3 factors. So we have 18 tools ready. And depending the assessment, based not on pillars, neither by elements, based on the 18 factors, we set up the workshop differently company by company.
I see. So you have a toolbox of techniques and exercises, and then you draw upon those that are most appropriate for that particular company based on the results.
In fact, internally we say we have 36 because we have, not for all, but we have for most of the 18 factors, we have stimulators and retainers, so breaks. For example, we have exercises to show how good in innovation is to have less processes, and in some groups they need that we show, and we have some exercises to show how good it is to have some processes. So some groups, some companies, some cultures, they need some stimulator or they need some break. So we have, in fact, positive doses and negative doses.
So this somewhat I don't want to say parallels, but in the quality control business, many people are familiar with the Six Sigma, right? Statistical quality control, and over the last few years, it went from manufacturing to the service industry, and then ended up in areas like banking and insurance and things that are primarily human processes. And I think what came out of that was a recognition that humans are not robots, and so trying to do quality control and a removal of all error rates also produce kind of a clinical sterile interaction. So I think many large companies sort of recognize they need to pull back from that, and also the rigidity of the quality control for manufacturing didn't really apply to situations that had some variation and needed to be much more responsive, right, to the environment. So there is this this movement or area that is referred to as lean or agile, right? And we know this from I know that you have an extensive technology and software IT sector background which uses these processes extensively, because software development is so intensive, such a communication intensive activity, and so highly creative, and it requires innovation just nearly in every effort. So in the software development, this lean and notion of lean and agile were also introduced into the Sigma. So now there's things like Lean Sigma, right? But generally, I know that you have clients in many different industries, but there's 2 industries I'm interested in hearing you talk about: energy, and then also banking. Right. So one being highly, you would think, manufacturing oriented, right? Natural resources and those sorts of things. Certainly a lot of technology is applied in the energy industry. but they're also very high quality control standards, right? That necessary for safety and for delivering logistics and those sorts of things. And then banking is highly information intensive and highly there's a human element and service orientation to that. And given your experience with those clients in taking the 6 pillars, the assessment, and then the techniques and the gaps, are there and then trying to thin them out or make them lean, are there any differences that you have found in terms of the emphasis between those two industries, or if you don't want to speak about specific clients and stuff, just something similar? What's the difference between sort of the Innovation 2.0 in a manufacturing versus Innovation 2.0 in a service-oriented company or industry, I should say?
So as you say, we have in retail, we have in the services, we have in banking, and well, in different sectors. And in fact, based on that, I left in 5 countries and I speak several languages, and I was living a long time outside of Spain. We work outside because that is an advantage element for this. That we can work in different countries, different cultures, different languages, and so we can cross 3-dimensional, which is sectors, countries, and cultures. So I would say that the more stable the sector, in our experience, the more stable the sector is, or are touched by the crisis. That is a fact. But some sectors like retail, it was very impressive how innovative they was and they are. And we are working with a Spanish retailer, very important, and it's impressive that they open to all the employees in the company the ways to get to capture ideas, and they create a lot of activities so that they involve creating the new company, so recreating the company. There are something like 30,000 people in the company. We work with a banking with a similar dimension, and I could not imagine their reaction or the dynamic they create will be the same. So, because in our experience, in the crisis, they move them to be innovative, and they change 180 degrees the culture in the retailer. And the banking is more, in our experience, is more conservative. They try and they do huge and interesting things, but they are too comfortable. So when you see countries like Germany, when we work in Germany, and you see Germans are not so creative, that is false, absolutely. Or the Latin, the Spaniards, we are very creative. No, we love improvisation. So we are not the best planning, but we are very good, moving around and doing things happening. But when we work in Germany, it's incredible that when we say them, we work with them, and you create activities and act, creating small innovation projects that create small initiatives. They don't ask for money. In Spain, one of the first questions they ask is for money. So it's a different perspective in our experience that in sectors like retail, they are used to work with less money. They don't ask for money. And if you work with banking, they think there's some kind of alignment between innovation is money needs to do it. And in Germany, it's a different issue. What in our experience working with industry in Germany, so metal industry and one bank in there, and they don't ask for money. They are like, we will ask for money, like we express in the book, ask for money when you have several prototypes, several ideas, because that failure is cheaper.
Are you saying ask for money? Is that are you referring to innovation isn't free, and that some believe that in order to have the benefits of innovation, you have to invest money that otherwise would not have been invested, versus the other view, which I think is more aligned with Innovation 2.0 premise in the book, which is if you innovate the culture, these are things that people are doing already. You just want to get them to do it maybe slightly differently, or to think more creatively about how they do the things they already do, and therefore it doesn't require additional funding. Is that you're saying that depending on the industry and the country and the pre-existing culture, that's the main difference that you find, the assumption that innovation costs money first, or innovation, it doesn't. Industries like retail that are used to doing things creatively without very much money because they have very tough constraints and low margins, that they are already predisposed to understanding that the cultural factors matter.
But so we have to avoid making a prejudgment and stimulate creativity of people. So that is what we say in the book about don't create so much processes. We ask just for two things. Please generate desire and take discipline, act with discipline to reach your desire. So what is discipline? That is the next question, very important. Discipline is conjunction of rigor and passions. And now with the crisis in Spain, for example, we all talk about innovation. Since 4 years, we're just talking like innovation. In fact, we forbid in the trainings, in the workshops, use the word innovation. When the managers are around the table, ready to get the result from survey, or the innovation team is ready to the first workshop with us, the first thing we write on the flip chart is innovation word, as a message is forbidden. Let's talk without this word. So 4 years ago, all companies start to talk about innovation. But all companies, we forget very quick that like quality was a process 30 years ago that just appeared and slowly went into the company industries, and they were changing and changing during 30 years. We think the innovation is a word that you can go to the pharmacy, buy, and inject in your vein and your body, and you have already in your area. No, doesn't work. Innovation is a culture thing that you have to do things differently. And it's like when you have habits. To change one habit, you need to have the desire. You want to change an habit, the first thing to change it is have the desire to change it. The second one is know which is the level of the habit that you want to change. The third thing, once you know the levels of the habit you have, is know how to change it. And the fourth thing you have to know is once you know the habit, you know the level, you know the how, is just do it with discipline. And the fifth things you have to do is be patient. Because if you, during 50, 40, 30 years was doing the things in the concrete, a certain way, you will not change the way you do this act, this thing, in 1 week. You will need time. And it's like when you think how we learn, in 95% of the concept, in the scientific concepts, in the 95%, all people is unconscious, incompetent. I don't know about the Big Bang, but if I know the Big Bang exists but have no idea about the Big Bang, then I am conscious, incompetent. When you learn and study about the Big Bang, maybe you will turn conscious, competent. And finally, when you are a doctor and you have already 30 years experience, now you are unconscious, competent. That is the cycle that we have to accept to turn innovative in the companies. That is the way, and we have to accept that these are the basic steps to turn a normal standard company to make it a one of the top companies. But the first thing is to have the desire, and the last is to have the passions.
So you said not to use the word innovation and innovative when you start the sessions in the workshops. Is there another word or term you and I have talked about entrepreneurship and what that means? What's the relationship between entrepreneurship and is that a direct replacement for innovation? Is that really what we're talking about here, or is there some other relationship between entrepreneurship and innovation? And how does that sort of factor into the work you're doing with your clients?
Maybe we should redefine innovation as the consequence of entrepreneurship. So stimulate the corporate entrepreneurship in your organization. Give prizes. Stimulate as you think much better in your culture. But think that you are not 15 people defining the future of the company. Involve all as they would be their own company. And as a consequence, you will have innovation. So we redefine that. Don't use innovation, stimulate corporate entrepreneurship, and give the tools, the people.
So this is a radical introduction. That is, I tend to like subversive acts. So this is certainly one that if you're introduced to a company that wants everyone to stay in line in their operational sort of duties, to ask them to act as entrepreneurs. Some of those people actually end up becoming your future competitors, right? Because they figure out some new ideas, concepts, innovation, and things that don't fit within the company, and they may leave the company. But this is a model that actually here in the high tech, you come from the high tech community as well, so you know that this is borrowed somewhat from the way that high tech companies grow rapidly, and then people who are there early as entrepreneurs make a little bit of money, and then they leave the company, and some of them go and take on new challenges, right? And then eventually go and actually sell the company back to the original company, yeah, or to a competitor. So, and that seems to have worked for the last 25 years. The spectacular growth in the technology sector, with lots of innovation in the business models, and certainly in the way that the companies are run and organized, the way that they're built. That certainly entrepreneurship has been a great contributor, great driver for how those entire ecosystems and clusters have formed. This is not just Silicon Valley. It's certainly New York, Boston corridor, other places in the U.S., places in Europe, Finland, Singapore, Israel is another place that's often referred to. So it is quite radical, right, for entrepreneurship to be introduced into the corporate sort of language. So it's interesting that now I'm viewing your role a little bit differently than as a consultant advisor. It's almost as if your clients are hiring you as a provocateur, a revolutionary, to come in and sit with them and stir up dissension, right? A little bit, at least enough to then reconstruct it so that it's productive. But so they're almost hiring you as an entrepreneur, as a surrogate entrepreneur, to act as someone to get others to try and adopt some of the attributes that you have from your own experiences. Is that right? Is that how they think of you?
We schematize our process with customers in 4 blocks. The first is diagnosis, the second is sensibilization, which is shake them and align them. The third is training, and the fourth is consultancy. And we was talking all the interview up to now about the first two. The third is already with middle managers and team people. And there we have a 4-day training where we mix sensibilization, not in a revolutionary way, not anymore, but so giving them common language, creating together tools, creating methodologies or method, how to, and defining the path, the framework, and the workflow, how to create small experiments. That is what we do in this 4-day workshop, or 5 days sometimes. The customers, they extend it to the 5th because then they want to make more activities, so just we extend it to 1 day more. And what we do in that workshop is when they finish the workshops, they know the lingua franca about innovation, the lingua franca about entrepreneurship, the tools they have available to innovate in the company, and the tools they are missing to innovate in the company, and how to innovate quick, cheap, failing and learning very quickly, and how to experiment and create and define the unknown variables very fast. Because innovate, if you make 5,000 experiments so you never fail, you are not innovating. To innovate, you have to fail. And most of the cultures and a lot of companies, they don't have the experience about failing. Because when you fail too much times in Latin countries like Spain, you have a big trouble. So this is the fourth, the third element we have is workshops with teams, innovation teams. We ask always to have 2 to 3 workshops team. Innovation teams. So no more to create a small initiative and experiment small. And the fourth element in our 4 blocks methodology is mentoring. So, for example, you cannot planify. A lot of companies, they are organized by project planning, and they use PMI or they use Microsoft Project and tools like that. For innovation, no, that doesn't work. You need you cannot planify a project, the whole project of innovation, because it's too much unknown variables. You have to experiment, learn, redefine, and so on. So they need a lot of mentoring. And we have some tools for the mentoring process. So we are coached, but it's not necessary to be coached. But I will recommend anyone that wants to make mentoring in innovation projects and teams that they have fun. So if you stimulate a fun environment, the failure will be celebrated, and you force to learn, you will see how fast the people fail in more and more complex issues. So they are taking more and more risks. And at the end, maybe for the prototype, they're the winner, you will offer money, resources. But they have to learn to experiment with lack of resources, at least almost nothing. So just do it with paper, carton, metal, whatever, a can. Show me the prototype and sell it. So that is all 4 blocks: diagnosis, sensibilization. The third block is workshops to teach the people, the teams, and the fourth is the mentoring.
A nice structure that's easy to sort of understand, and I think it's would fit within most companies to adopt. So, what's the best way to work with you?
So the best way, I'm available on LinkedIn with Fran Chuan.
Okay, Fran. Well, thank you for your time. Certainly this was a a lesson in Innovation 2.0.
Yeah, thank you, Ray.